Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to do this video here today on basically a science experiment sample, like an example of what it's like living with the condition that I have and what actually happened to cause my system and my brain, my cells to be overloaded with carbon monoxide and then additional particles, gases, chemicals, and such along the way. Since people seem to have a really hard time understanding how I'm forced to live, what I'm forced to deal with, how this all works, people can't understand how I know there's gas spills or chemical spills or what's in the air or if there's carbon monoxide. They're all different symptoms for me. They're all different feelings. So each one has its own specific set of symptoms. But I'm going to show you with this experiment so somebody can understand that it doesn't ever go away. I would need somewhere between 5 and 10 years of everyday treatment and remaining in a sterile environment to probably get to a place where most of it's removed. And I'm not even sure that that would be possible to remove 100% of it. And even then, you know, that's really hard to do, especially when you try to pick up pieces of your life and try to have some quality of life. Obviously, you're going to start to go some places. So you will eventually pick up other small particles along the way. But then at that point, treatment still has to be maintained to keep removing what you are taking in if you do decide to continue to go out into the world or begin to go out into the world after such an extreme injury and pick up other particles of other kinds, or if there's explosions or gas spills or chemical spills. So I'm going to explain using these empty bottles right here. This is going to be the one that represents my brain. This is going to be the one that represents my body. And I guess you could say this would be a normal person's brain or body. Let's just say, here, I'll show you. Okay. Okay, so now let's say this is a normal person's brain and body filled with blood and normal bodily fluids that run throughout your brain and your body. And this is representing the brain. So this cap would be the blood-brain barrier. So if this is the brain, this is up top. Now with me, what happened was the carbon monoxide entered through my breath over a very long weekend of a very big exposure, and then I woke up 4 days later with it overloaded. But prior to that, I also gave birth while suffering from it, just did not know what the problem was. It had not broken through my brain, although I did have a severe lack of oxygen to the brain incident during labor and delivery along with the baby, and we acquired brain injuries due to that. It did not break all the way through. So when I took in enough carbon monoxide, basically, it was busting through at the top where the lid of this bottle was, maximum pressure to the top of this lid, and that was my brain pressed against my skull, where I had a 4-hour brain swelling episode, and then it busted all the way through. Let's say the cap then busted all the way off, and then the carbon monoxide flowed up through that blood-brain barrier, flooded all the way, and then this cap blows because this is my system. And it all just flooded all down into everywhere after that brain injury happened and the brain swelling episode happened. So now this is the blood-brain barrier. It's now remained open. The entire thing, all around my entire brain, broke all the way through that day. And now to kind of represent how I was going forward, I'm going to use some juice so you can see the color added to it. To understand how that actually worked. So I have to take some water out to show you. But then I'm going to take some juice, because the brain had about, I don't know if you want to call it like somewhere around like 20 to 100 more times, it had 20 to 100 more times particles than the rest of my body did. So put the whole thing in just like that. Okay, so now that leaves my brain significantly more overloaded than my body right here. This is how I woke up after that 4-hour brain swelling episode, with my brain having much more carbon monoxide loaded up than the rest of my body, but at the same time, going forward, everything was flowing through. All carbon monoxide particles flowed through every inch of my body at all times for years on end, built up in knots up here in my brain, and flowed up and down in my brain at the same time for years on end as well. Now, eventually, once I reached a certain point in treatment, which took years, it took about 2 years almost of everyday treatment. But remember, I did not begin treatment until about 14 months after that extreme day. Finally, the body started to it was removed from both a little bit at the same time, it was. But there was so much more in the brain, it took significantly longer to reduce the amount in my brain because there's so much more up there. Because the brain takes the most oxygen. So when you overload with carbon monoxide, it takes over where the oxygen goes first before anywhere else, and the brain takes the most oxygen, so it takes from your brain first. And then it was loading up. So once I started clearing it, once I started doing treatment, you then have about this much left in my body. After reaching the first significant threshold that I'd crossed, that much had been removed from my body. Whereas then the brain, then maybe had about that much. But at the same time, here I was trying to get to and from treatment homebound, and I'm taking in little bits of carbon monoxide along the way. One little breath here and there was enough to set over my entire system. And because I was homebound, I wasn't really going anywhere but treatment and back and to work and back. I wasn't really picking up particles of any other kind during that extreme part of it. So it was mostly just carbon monoxide. Little bits would add to it, which would then make me violently ill even more with my already continuous symptoms. So, like I said, I crossed several thresholds, kept treating daily for, an additional almost year before I dropped it down to 2 days a week. And then it was still another year, and then it was still like another almost year of a day a week. So as time goes on, I'm still treating, I'm still removing stuff. But then I was abruptly uprooted from my home after the Ford gas leak happened. And this was probably about 7-8 months into crossing that first threshold. So then I started taking in Ford's gas particles as well. But by then I had treated every day for another 8 months or so. So let's say my body then eventually had this much carbon monoxide, and then my brain eventually had about that much left. But at the same time, then Ford is spilling. So once Ford started spilling, Now you got their particles added to it. So now you got, this is what's going on here. So you got Ford's particles flowing through my brain first into the open brain tissue. Even though the sides and the back were healed, the top and the front were not. So it was flowing through the top and the front, loading up. This was Ford's gas added to the already carbon monoxide, already open brain tissue up here. Loading up, just keep on loading up. And I was trying to go to treatment to remove it along the way, but at the same time, it's not just loading in my brain, it's flowing through. It's also going into my body, just like this. It's flowing through all of it. It's going through my brain, it's running about equally through it. But again, the majority of the carbon monoxide is still lodged in my brain. It's lodged in all my cells, but my brain more heavily. So now this is Ford's gas added to it. And now I'm walking around like this, and I'm pretty much staying like this because I maintained treatment until I got us out of here. So I just treated twice a week that entire time until I got us out of here. Now, once I got out of here, I then got down to Ohio, and there was a chemical spill in Wixom, Michigan. And if you look up the story of the guy who did it and how it all happened, it kind of seems like a story of demonic possession. So I'll do a video on that because it directly affected me, and I don't know if that's what it really was or not. But if you read the story, it kind of seems that way. Now that chemical had spread all the way to Flat Rock and then to my house in Ohio. There was so much of it, it had spread all over 100 miles out. In every which direction, again into the waterways. Still, they're not telling anybody it came anywhere near any of these areas. They're telling people it's contained out in Wixom somewhere, but it was not. So then that hit me once I got us to safety, and we've got all this in our systems because this pertains to my son as well. So we maintained some treatment, got a little bit more clear. You know, take a little bit out because then we removed ourselves. We were a little bit better for a little while. Although the initial carbon monoxide injury is still flowing through our brains and our bodies. So we're still loaded up like this, and with some remnants of the Ford gas leak. But now you've got these particles coming from the Wixom spill that we're now taking in, which are a different size, they're a different type, causing different symptoms. And it actually cut off all oxygen to my left leg because the blood-brain barrier not only coats the brain, but it coats the spinal cord. And I had a lower back injury from falling all the time after I had the baby without enough oxygen from the brain damage. I fell so hard, I broke a part of my back that already had scoliosis. I don't know if you really consider it broken, but I definitely messed something up, and nothing ever showed on any scans, but there's still a permanent problem today. So slightly to the left of the center of my lower back, the chemical spill from Wixom starts loading up. So that's going through my brain. It only went through my brain slightly, and it was not coming into the interior of the home in the manner in which the Ford gas spill does. So there's a little bit kind of added to my brain, but this is my body, and it was all mostly going to the left leg. The lower back and the left leg, cutting off all oxygen to the left leg to the point where I could not walk for 3 months. I was literally stuck on the floor of my house in Ohio for 3 months like this. Could not walk. I had to do everything that I could just to get some groceries one time and get around the block and to the bank. Because at one point my toilet had broke and I had to get a plumber, and then I had to get to the bank, which was only around the block. And I could barely get there and back because I couldn't breathe the particles in the outside air. So breathing the particles in the outside air was a problem. So now you've got these other particles added to it. And this is what's going on. So now you've got the brain still loaded up with carbon monoxide. You got some of the gas particles from Ford in there, most of which has kind of been removed. It doesn't bind as tight. It doesn't stay as long. It removes a little easier once you're removed from it. But then you've got Wixom's chemical spill as well. So this is the body with significantly less, but we're still stuck like this. Eventually there was the train explosion in, I forget the name of the city, but it's over there toward, it was in Ohio, toward Pennsylvania, where the train exploded, and I can't remember the name of the city. it was 190 miles from my house in Ohio, and it eventually made its way there. And the only thing I really experienced was some dizziness upon being outside too long. However, around the time that happened, I was not at my house in Ohio outside very often. I was in the area, but not outside very often, because then my dad had his injury. But a couple times when it first made its way over there was so extreme, I did have some violent vomiting episodes from it. It eventually did make its way to my house, because when those things happen, they spread everywhere. That's how it gets dissipated. That's how it gets gotten rid of. Every explosion, every spill. I don't care who told you what. I don't care what agency told you it's contained. That's just not how things work. It's not even logical. They spread it everywhere in every case, in every situation. That's how that works. So it eventually made its way to my house, and I eventually got violently ill from that as well. It didn't stay very long, and then I spent a lot of time in Michigan because of my dad's injury, or I spent most of the time indoors when I was in Ohio. So I didn't deal too much with that. It was just once it reached my home, there was a couple month period where it was fairly significant. And I had a little bit of trouble cutting the grass a few times, although my yard was not big there, so it wasn't as big of a problem. But I was violently vomiting, and I looked up the cases of the other people from the train explosion, and people without a condition who lived in that area, they were experiencing that as well with no condition. So basically, more of that stuff gets removed. I come back home, get back to Flat Rock, and I'm kind of mostly stuck like this upon returning back. But then Ford has spilled 2 more times. So now we're adding more of Ford's gas to my brain. It's mostly in my brain. It's not flowing as much into my body, these 2 most recent spills, because I removed myself from treatment for some months and just stayed homebound. I was better off staying put at that point. It sealed my brain tissue shut a little bit more by breaking from treatment, because it was so open from all the continuous treatment that me staying put and just resting and sheltering in place caused it to seal a little bit. So now that I'm back and Ford has spilled more, it's not so much flowing through my entire body the way it was. It is loading up in my brain quite heavily still. Blood-brain barrier being open, flowing straight into my body, and it is good getting into my body to some degree. It depends on the level and how much I've taken in, how much I'm paying attention, or how much I'm outside. I'm trying not to be, but it is getting in there, just not at a significant rate the way it was during the first spill, because the brain tissue's a little bit more sealed. But again, it is still getting in. This is basically how I'm forced to live. My son was born that way, so it's harder to get a description out of him, although to some degree he does understand. He does know at certain times when there's an issue or when he needs treatment or what's going on. He can tell at sometimes. It's a little different because he was born that way. He wasn't normal first the way I was, so I can tell a difference because I was completely healthy. But this is how we're forced to live. We basically just live walking around like this. That's it. We do need additional treatment for the long term to keep removing all of this out, which would be hyperbaric oxygen treatment. Now, I do use some other homeopathic methods. I'll talk about that stuff in a different video. I might even have to put it on Patreon. I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to put it on YouTube, but I'll get to that eventually. I just kind of want to give everybody an idea, since everybody can't seem to comprehend when I'm saying we can't take in particles of any kind. When you add any little bit to this, it creates extreme symptoms immediately and near-death experiences immediately upon taking in the particles, because none of those are supposed to be in there at all. So it adds to what's already in there, and you see it's adding to it, adding color to it, adding an additional problem. So that is a huge issue that we're still dealing with. I do need to get us removed from this area as quickly as possible, since it looks like they're not going to stop doing what they're doing. So I got numerous problems here. And at the root is my mother and her ongoing crime. So I guess my quickest way out of this at this point is to work on getting her apprehended for her crimes, which are all provable. Quite a few of them are provable. And if the right people can come forward and you know that she's been talking, flapping her jaw to you about all this stuff that isn't real with me, if you watch enough of my videos, you'll realize everything I'm talking about. I'm not known to lie about anything. Everything she's described about me is not true. Somebody needs to come forward, because I know there's many people who have heard the delusions and the lies and, you know, the passing of the gossip and the slander and the defamation of character has gone around numerous cities and states at this point. So, you know, people kind of need to come forward. Everything on my channel I'm talking about is 100% reality. Nothing is exaggerated. It would kind of help get the situation under control so we could at least get ourselves to safety, because apprehending her would help be able to get my life in order. Because at the root, she has caused every single problem, including me going to work at the place that had caused all of this. Because if she had not gone on the escapade in 2013, I would have never been in that restaurant in the first place. So this is how we're forced to live. Again, I live with the blood-brain barrier open. So everything goes right through, every breath, anything I soak in, anything swallowed wrong or drank wrong, ate wrong, any wrong particle soaked into the skin, injected, any of that. It all goes right through. It's all a problem. So, you know, that's why we live modified lives. I try to do the best I can to, you know, not take in particles. But when Ford keeps spilling in the manner in which they do, and we're forced to live like this, it really sucks. We already live like this. They're adding to it. And then and all that, it looks hot and spicy. It is. It feels away. It's radiating out my ears. So, you know, now with the center being closed, it's going to be a little more challenging. I do need to upgrade my chamber, or at least get the one that I have up and running. So, to replace the concentrator, it's about $2,000. Still waiting on my homeowner's insurance. They're supposed to cover it. My private health insurance was going to pay for a rental. However, because of the way carbon monoxide poisoning is checked for improperly, you are not going to get the result that they're looking for on paper for the concentrator portion to be covered. So it is a $317 a month rental out of pocket. I owned the initial chamber. I'm waiting on the homeowner's insurance to cover. So really what I need is a complete replacement, because I owned it. I shouldn't be renting it from anyone. So, yeah, just want to do a quick video, give a description of how we're forced to live, how this all works, since everybody seems to have a problem understanding when I'm saying we can't take in particles of any kind. This is how we're forced to live. This is the result. This is what it's like. And you live feeling that way. The way these bottles look dirty, that's disgusting. That's how you live feeling. You live feeling that way. Your brain lives like this. Your body lives like this. You live feeling that way. It doesn't go away. So, yeah, just had to tell everybody that. I'll probably release this video in a little bit, but I'll be back with another one. Thanks. Bye.